The county inspector stood at the edge of Lily Vasquez's property and wrinkled his nose. "Ma'am, this isn't farmland. This is a waste dump with a river view." Lily said nothing. She was holding a leather surveyor's case, scratched and water-stained, that had belonged to her grandfather. Inside were maps he'd drawn in 1968, before the factories came. 2 months earlier, the auction at Clackamas County Courthouse, Oregon, lasted 8 minutes. Property 12-3S, 1E, 00800, 14 acres, July 22, 2023, 2:14 p.m. The auctioneer's voice carried across the room. Riverfront parcel, former industrial site, contaminated soil classification, sold as is with no guarantees. Do I hear 5,000? Lily Vasquez, 26 years old, held a cashier's check for $5,800, everything she had after selling her car and emptying the account her grandfather had left her. Around her, developers in suits exchanged glances and stayed silent. They knew what the environmental report said: heavy metals, petroleum residue, decades of dumping from the plywood mill upstream. 5,000, she said. Nobody countered. The gavel fell at $5,200. She signed the papers in a windowless office. The clerk, a man with gray stubble, pushed the deed across. "You related to Miguel Vasquez? The one who used to run sheep on the plateau?" "My grandfather. He knew this river before they ruined it." The clerk's voice softened. "He tried to stop the mill from dumping. Testified at every hearing. Nobody listened." Lily nodded. She'd been 9 when Grandpa Miguel lost his grazing lease. 200 acres taken when the county rezoned for industrial use. He'd worked in warehouses after that, saved every dollar, drawn maps in the evenings by lamplight in the apartment they shared after her parents died. He'd left her 2 things when he passed 6 months ago: the $5,800 and a lock surveyor's case with a combination only she knew, her grandmother's wedding date. Inside, hand-drawn maps of the Clackamas River watershed, soil samples in glass vials labeled with dates from the 1960s, and a letter on yellowed paper in her grandfather's angular handwriting. The river remembers what it was. What they poisoned, it can clean. The willows know how. Study the maps. Plant what absorbs. The answer is in root systems, not chemicals. Do not waste time arguing with men who see only money. Let the land prove itself. She drove to the property that afternoon in a borrowed pickup, her cousin's truck reluctantly loaned. The land was a scar: cracked concrete slabs, rusted drums half buried in mud, chain-link fence collapsed into blackberry brambles. The riverbank was a steep slope of contaminated sediment, dark and slick. The smell was industrial: oil, rust, something chemical she couldn't name. She walked the perimeter. Took 90 minutes. The north edge bordered a still-operating gravel quarry. The south side ran along the river for a quarter-mile. The interior was 14 acres of poisoned ground that nobody wanted. That night, in a tent pitched on the only flat spot, Lily opened her grandfather's maps by headlamp. They showed the river's original course, the floodplain before channelization, the native vegetation that had once filtered runoff and held the banks. His notes were meticulous: willow species that hyperaccumulate heavy metals, poplar varieties that metabolize petroleum compounds, native rushes and sedges that stabilize soil while processing toxins. Not farming in the traditional sense. Phytoremediation, using plants to heal contaminated land. The calculations were in faded pencil: timelines for soil recovery, planting densities, harvest cycles for willow biomass. 5 to 7 years to clean the soil enough for food crops. But willow biomass could be harvested in 3 years and sold for biofuel or craft materials. The next morning, she drove to a native plant nursery 4 hours south. The owner, a woman named Ruth with soil under her fingernails, listened to her plan. "You're talking about planting willows in contaminated soil? You know they'll uptake whatever's in that ground." "That's the point," Lily said. "They concentrate the metals in their tissues. We harvest the biomass, dispose of it properly, and the soil gets cleaner." Ruth studied her. "How old are you?" 26. "Your grandfather teach you this?" "He left me his research." Ruth was quiet for a moment. "Then, I'll give you a starter price on the whips. 2,000 willows, for varieties. But you're going to need help planting." Lily bought the willows with money she didn't have, charged to a credit card with a $3,200 limit. She hauled them back in the borrowed truck bundles of dormant willow whips wrapped in wet burlap. The county inspector arrived 3 days later. Someone had complained, probably the quarry operator who'd wanted the land cheap for expansion. "Miss Vasquez, this property is classified as contaminated. You can't just start planting without remediation permits." "I am remediating," Lily said. "With plants." He looked at the bundles of willows, at the shallow trenches she'd been digging by hand. "This isn't remediation. This is gardening. You need soil removal, professional contractors, environmental oversight. Can't afford that. Then you can't develop this property." He handed her a notice. "Cease all activity until you submit proper plans and get approval." After he left, Lily sat on a concrete slab and read the notice. Fines for noncompliance started at $500 per day. She had $11 in her checking account. That evening, her cousin Marco came to pick up his truck. He looked at the land, the willows, the notice in her hand. "Lily, this is crazy. You bought a Superfund site. It's not classified Superfund. It should be." He softened slightly. "Grandpa Miguel loved you. But this isn't farmland. You should sell it to the quarry and cut your losses." She didn't answer. After he drove away, she walked down to the riverbank in the dusk. The water was brown, moving fast from upstream ring. Trash caught in the rocks. But underneath the contamination, underneath the decades of abuse, the river was still alive. Lily opened her grandfather's letter again, read the last line. "Let the land prove itself." She started planting willows the next morning, permit or no permit. The willows went into the ground and rose following the elevation contours her grandfather had mapped. Lily worked alone, 14-hour days, hands blistered raw. Each whip was a stick of potential, dormant now, but ready to root. By mid-August, she'd planted 800 willows. The inspector came back. "Miss Vasquez, you're in violation of the cease work notice. I'm authorized to issue fines." "Issue them," Lily said quietly. She kept planting. He stood there, uncomfortable. "Ma'am, I'm trying to help you. This land is contaminated. Without proper remediation, you're just exposing yourself to toxins. The plants are the remediation. That's not how it works." She straightened up, mud to her knees. In 1968, this riverbank filtered snowmelt for 40,000 acres of watershed. My grandfather has soil samples proving it. Then the mill came. They dumped for 30 years. The county let them because it meant jobs and tax revenue. Now the mill's gone, the land is poisoned, and nobody wants to fix it because it's expensive. So I'm fixing it the way nature would, slow, cheap, and patient. The inspector's face shifted, something like sympathy, maybe respect. "Even if you're right, the county won't recognize this as legitimate remediation. Then I'll prove it works first. Ask permission later." He left without issuing the fine. The neighbors came next. The quarry operator, a man named Drummond, showed up in a white F-350. He was maybe 50, thick-necked, used to getting his way. "You're Vasquez?" "Yes, sir. I offered $5,000 for this parcel before the auction. County said it had to go public. Now you're sitting on it planting sticks. Willows. Whatever. I'll give you $6,000. You make a profit and move on. It's not for sale." His expression hardened. "Little girl, you're in over your head. This land is worthless. Take the money." Lily kept working, pushing a willow whip into the mud. "My grandfather spent 30 years watching people destroy this river. I'm not selling it so you can pave it." Drummond's jaw tightened. "You'll change your mind when winter comes and you're sleeping in a tent on a toxic waste site." He drove off, spraying gravel. The willows leafed out in September, bright green against dark soil, their roots driving deep into the contaminated sediment. Lily took soil samples weekly, sent them to a university lab using a monitoring program her grandfather had noted in his research. The results would take months. She lived in the tent, bathed in the river downstream from her property, ate rice and beans cooked on a camp stove. Her cousin stopped calling. Her few friends from community college sent worried texts that she answered less and less. But the land was changing. Slowly, subtly. The willows grew fast, some varieties putting on 6 feet by October. Their roots spread through the soil, breaking up compacted sediment, creating channels for air and water. The phytoremediation was invisible but real, the plants uptaking heavy metals, storing them in leaf tissue, transpiring petroleum compounds into the atmosphere where they'd break down. In late October, A woman came walking along the riverbank, 50-something, gray braid, camera around her neck. She stopped at the property line. "You're the one planting willows?" "Yes, ma'am. I'm Dr. Sarah Kowalski. I teach environmental science at Portland State. One of my students mentioned this project. May I look around?" Lily hesitated, then nodded. Dr. Kowalski walked the rows, examined the plants, asked careful questions. Lily showed her the maps, the planting plan, her grandfather's research. Dr. Kowalski was quiet for a long time. Finally, "Your grandfather was right. This is textbook phytoremediation. The species selection is perfect. These willows are known hyperaccumulators. If you can maintain this for 3 to 5 years, you'll significantly reduce soil contamination. The county says it's not legitimate remediation. The county is behind the times." Dr. Kowalski smiled. "Would you let me bring my students out? Document this. As a case study? No cost to you. We just monitor and take samples." "Yes," Lily said. "Please." The students came in November, 8 of them with soil cores and testing equipment. They treated Lily like she was running an experiment, not gambling her last dollar on contaminated land. They took samples, measured willow growth, mapped the root systems with ground-penetrating radar. One student, a guy named Tomas, stayed after the others left. "This is incredible. Do you know how rare this is? Most contaminated sites just sit empty because cleanup costs millions. You're doing it for the price of plants and labor. My grandfather's idea, not mine. Still, you're the one doing the work." Winter came hard. The first frost hit November 18th, dropping to 21 degrees. Lily woke in the tent with ice on the inside of the fabric. The willows went dormant, dropping their leaves, looking dead. The quarry operator sized chance. Drummond came back with a county commissioner in tow, a man named Haskell, heavy and formal. "Miss Vasquez, we've had complaints about illegal habitation and unpermitted development. The county is prepared to condemn this property if you can't demonstrate compliance." Lily stood in the frozen mud in her grandfather's old coat. Compliance with what? Zoning regulations, health and safety codes, environmental protection statutes. I'm protecting the environment. That's the whole point. Haskell's face was bureaucratic stone. "You're living in a tent on contaminated land. That's a liability issue. And your so-called remediation isn't approved by any regulatory body." Behind him, Drummond looked satisfied. Dr. Kowalski's voice cut across the cold air. "Actually, Commissioner, I'm with Portland State's Environmental Science Department. This project is under academic observation as a phytoremediation case study. Ms. Vasquez is using established, peer-reviewed methods. I'd be happy to provide documentation." Haskell blinked. "That doesn't address the habitation issue." "I'm working on that," Lily said quietly. She wasn't, but she would. They left, Haskell uncertain, Drummond furious. That night, Lily sat in the tent and did the math. She had $400 left. No income. Winter closing in. The willows were dormant and would be for months. The county was looking for reasons to shut her down. The quarry operator wanted her gone. Her grandfather's letter was creased from reading. "Do not waste time arguing with men who see only money." She'd stopped arguing, but she was almost out of time. The flood came January 9th. 3 days of rain, heavy and cold, swelled the Clackamas beyond its banks. Lily woke to water surrounding her tent, rising fast. She grabbed her grandfather's surveyor's case and climbed to high ground, the only concrete slab that sat above the floodplain. By noon, the river had swallowed the lower 10 acres. Brown water surged through the willow rows, fierce and wild. The quarry flooded too, trucks stranded, equipment submerged, the office trailer floating loose. Drummond's operation shut down completely, but Lily's willows held. She watched from her concrete island as the flood peaked, then slowly receded. The willows bent with the current, their flexible stems and deep roots anchoring the soil. When the water dropped 3 days later, the bank that had been crumbling for decades was stable, held together by the root matrix the willows had built. The quarry's unplanted bank collapsed. 20 feet of sediment slumped into the river, taking fence posts and a storage shed with it. Dr. Kowalski arrived with her students on January 15th, cameras and measuring equipment in hand. They documented everything: erosion patterns, soil retention, the contrast between Lily's planted bank and the devastated quarry property. "This is remarkable," Dr. Kowalski said. photographing the willow rows that had survived the flood. In 3 months, you stabilized a bank that's been eroding for 30 years. The county needs to see this. The county saw it. So did the regional newspaper. A reporter named Janet Ochoa came out, interviewed Lily, photographed the willows against the backdrop of the quarry's collapsed bank. The article ran January 22nd. Young farmer uses grandfather's wisdom to heal contaminated riverbank, while county-approved quarry crumbles. The county commissioners called an emergency meeting. Dr. Kowalski testified, showing data from the student monitoring project. The soil samples were preliminary, but they showed measurable reduction in heavy metal concentrations in the top 18 inches, exactly where the willow roots were densest. Commissioner Haskell, facing public pressure, reversed his position. It appears Ms. Vasquez's methods have merit. We'll be working with her to formalize her remediation plan. Drummond tried one more time. He came to the property in February with a new offer, $8,000. Lily was pruning willows, harvesting the first-year growth for biomass. She'd already sold 2 cords to a basket weaver in Portland for $300. It wasn't much, but it was something. Not for sale, she said. You're being stubborn. I'm being patient. He looked at her, at the willows, at the stable riverbank. Something shifted in his face. Not respect exactly, but recognition. Your grandfather would have said the same thing. You knew him? Testified against him at the zoning hearings. He told me I was destroying the river for short-term profit. I told him he was standing in the way of progress. Drummond was quiet a moment. Turns out he was right. After he left, Lily kept working. The willows were thriving, some varieties already 10 feet tall. In March, Dr. Kowalski brought a delegation from the State Environmental Agency. They walked the property, reviewed the monitoring data, examined the flood-stabilized bank. The lead inspector, a woman named Chun, took extensive notes. Ms. Vasquez, what you've accomplished here is significant. We'd like to use this as a demonstration site for low-cost riparian remediation. Would you be willing to document your methods? Yes, ma'am. There may be grant funding available for expansion and monitoring. Interested, Lily thought about her grandfather, testifying at hearings nobody listened to, drawing maps nobody wanted. Very interested. The grant came through in April, $15,000 for expanded monitoring, additional plantings, and a small stipend for site maintenance. Lily used part of it to buy a used trailer, small, but better than a tent. The rest went into willows and native plants, sedges, rushes, Oregon grape, red-twig dogwood. By summer, the 14 acres were transforming. The contaminated scar was becoming a riparian corridor, willows and native plants where there had been concrete and chemical sludge. The soil samples showed continued improvement. Birds returned, kingfishers, herons, warblers. Lily saw an otter one evening, sliding through the shallows. Other landowners started calling. Properties along the river, contaminated and abandoned, owners desperate for solutions that didn't cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Lily consulted for 3 of them, charging $500 per site assessment. She taught them her grandfather's methods, helped them source plants, design remediation plans based on their specific contamination. In August, 1 year after the auction, Lily stood on the riverbank with Dr. Kowalski and reviewed the monitoring data. Heavy metal concentrations down by 47% in the planted zones. Soil structure improving. Erosion eliminated. Wildlife returning. You've proven the model works, Dr. Kowalski said. This could change how we approach brownfield remediation across the region. Lily looked at the willows, now 12 feet tall and thick-stemmed, their roots holding the bank that had nearly washed away. My grandfather proved it 50 years ago. I just finally got people to pay attention. That evening, she sat in the trailer and opened the surveyor's case. The maps were worn now, marked with her own notes and observations. She turned to the letter, read it one more time. Her grandfather's words felt like prophecy. The river remembers what it was. Let the land prove itself. The land had proven itself. The dirty riverbank nobody wanted was becoming the best investment she could have made. Not in money, though that was coming, but in purpose, in healing, in proof that patience and knowledge could restore what greed had destroyed. Lily smiled and began sketching plans for next year's planting. There were 40 more acres along the river that needed healing. And now, she knew exactly how to do it.